So after failing to complete my bingo card at the final hurdle for the 2025 Our Fantasy Bingo Challenge, you can bet that I'm looking for redemption in 2026. So if you guys don't know what the Our Fantasy Bingo Challenge is, it is a bingo card that is created by the fantasy community on Reddit. There are 25 prompts to fulfill and you don't have to complete them all. You can just try and get a bingo, like a line. I obviously am an overachiever. I'm in the book community. I love a readathon. I love a reading challenge, and I am predominantly a fantasy and sci-fi reader. So I aim to complete the entire card every year, and I missed technically 2 prompts in 2025, but there is a little bit of a loophole that you can use that could have made me achieve one of the extra prompts, and I just knew that I'd already lost, so I didn't try and use it. But if you've missed my recap and you want to see what I read for the 2025 challenge and how I failed, then I will leave that linked for you guys so you can go ahead and check it out. But this video is going to be everything that I hopefully intend to read for the 2026 challenge. So as I mentioned, this has been created by Reddit, so you can head over to the fantasy subreddit to get your bingo card if you would also like to participate. I will leave all of that linked down below for you guys. This is a challenge that is designed to be a little bit difficult. There are some open-ended prompts in here that are a little bit easier to fill, and there are some that push you a little bit more into a niche, because the whole point of this challenge is to force you outside of your comfort zone within the fantasy genre to explore some things that maybe you wouldn't organically reach for. Now, that being said, there are also various levels of difficulty of this challenge. There are various modes that you can complete. You have the standard mode, which has a wider parameter of how you can fulfill the prompt. You have the hard mode, which normally narrows the criteria a little bit, makes it a little bit more difficult. And then you also have hero mode, which is to review every book that you read for the Our Fantasy Bingo prompts. I'm pretty sure you can do that on a platform of your choice as well. There are also rules for this challenge. You can't double up on any of the prompts, so it is a strictly 1 book per prompt kind of deal. You can only use an author once unless you also use them for a singular short story within the short story prompt, and then also read a full-length novel by them for a different prompt. And you can only utilize 1 reread for a prompt. Everything else that you read has to be brand new to you for the challenge. There is also 1 loophole that you have, which is the one that I just mentioned, where if you are really struggling with a prompt, then you are able to swap it out for a prompt off an old board. I do normally like to reserve this because I suck at completing the short story square every single year. It's one of the ones I failed on last year, which is why I couldn't utilize my swap for the other prompt that I also didn't manage to fulfill. So that does definitely come in handy for me. But generally, I mean, I'm not that mad that I didn't manage to fill my bingo card. For me, it's more of a kind of marker of how widely I read throughout the year, and there's always a bunch of these prompts that I fill really easily, that there are a ton of different books that I read throughout the year that would just organically fit for the prompts, and then a couple of them I have to actually try for, and honestly that is the reason why I didn't manage to complete it last year. But it's fine, you don't get anything for accomplishing this apart from satisfaction, so it's truly not that big a deal. But today I'm going to run through all of my possibilities of things that I may read to fulfill these prompts throughout the next year. The challenge runs from April to the end of March every single year. For some of these prompts that are a little bit more open-ended, I may organically read something else that fits the prompts before I get to these ones. I've also, where possible, where I've been able to find something on my shelves that fits for hard mode, I have tried to achieve hard mode. Some of these were a little bit difficult and I didn't have as much range, and some of them there's potential for me to dig a little bit deeper to find something outside of what I own to be able to fulfill the prompt in the future. But as I am currently focusing on keeping on top of things like my arcs and my rep packages and stuff, as well as trying to get through my backlist, I have used books that are either on my TBR anyway for things like book clubs, or books that I already own to fulfill these prompts, because that just makes sense for my current reading goals right now. So I'm just going to dive right into talking about those books now, and the first prompt is a book with a trans or non-binary protagonist, and the protagonist can't be an alien or a robot. The hard mode for this I have not currently hit, as that is to read a book that is set in a pre-modern time period, and I'm pretty sure that the book that I've selected, well, I know that the book that I've selected is futuristic, but that one is A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. This is the second book in the Monk and Robot duology. It's actually not a book that I currently own, but I did own A Psalm for the Wild Built. I read it right at the beginning of this year. I really enjoyed it, and I really want to get to A Prayer for the Crown Shy. I do know that I can get this one on Libby, or eventually I do want to pick up my own copy because Becky Chambers is one of my favorite authors. But the main character of this book is non-binary, and they are searching for cricket sounds. It's a futuristic society where there has been a rise of the robots, and that kind of forced humanity to reassess and really embrace nature. So the robots receded into the background. They actually went out into the wilderness, and the humans have prioritized kind of embracing, working with, and living with nature. However, because of the Earth's history, things like crickets just don't really exist anymore, and our main character is desperate to experience that wild cricket sound for the first time. It's a book, or a series I guess, that deals a lot with ennui and kind of feeling restless, and like you need to achieve more and fulfill more, and even though you ought to be happy with what you have in life, there's something that's holding you back from feeling that way. And in the search for this wild cricket sound, our main character encounters a robot who is returning to humanity to ask what humans need, what do humans want, are humans happy without robots in their life, because they in some way feel a little bit of guilt for the way that they think that they've abandoned humanity, and they want to make sure that humanity is doing okay without them. The second prompt is the only prompt on this board that I have not assigned a book to, and that is because it is to judge a book by its title. So literally read a book simply because you like the title. However, the hard mode for this is to read that book without knowing what it's about, or reading any reviews, or really knowing anything about it. So I do kind of want to hit hard mode for this, and I thought it would be really fun if at some point I went to the library or I went to a bookstore and I picked a book solely based on the title and didn't look into it and just read it. So I'm thinking about doing this for a vlog. There are a ton of books I've got, especially like some older subscription box books, where at this point I've forgotten what they're about. So like I will have known in the past, but it didn't stick with me. I haven't heard a great deal about them. So one of those could fit for this, but I did think it would be fun to go somewhere with the goal in mind of finding something that sounds really interesting within the title and using that to fulfill this prompt. So maybe we'll do that in the future, or maybe organically this one will be filled, but that is the reason why I haven't assigned a book to this one. The third prompt I have already completed. Yes, I know, I'm just that good. And that is to read a translated book. So the hard mode for this one is to read a book that was first translated into my language in the last 5 years. So for that one, I have read The Rainfall Market by Yu Young Guang. This one is a little bit of a cozy introspective story. It also reads a little bit like a middle grade because it is following quite a young girl who is very lonely, and she feels like she has nothing in her life to enjoy. Her family aren't doing very well financially. She lives just with her mother. I think her father has left, and her mother's struggling to make ends meet. She feels like she has no friends, nobody cares about her. She doesn't feel like she's very good at anything, and so she writes a letter to the Rainfall Market, which is something that turns up every rainy season. And if you write a letter sharing your misfortunes, you can receive a ticket to attend the Rainfall Market, where you can turn your life around and trade your misfortunes for a happier future. So our main character actually receives a gold ticket, which allows her to explore multiple possible futures. The only catch is that she has to choose one of those futures before the end of the rainy season, otherwise she will be stuck in the Rainfall Market forever. The next prompt is small press or self-published. So this is to read a book that has been published by a small press or is self-published. The hard mode for this is to read a book that has under 100 ratings on Goodreads, or is by an author from a marginalized group. So the book that I currently have in for this does not fulfill the hard mode, but I do think there's potential for me to achieve that in the coming year. But I know an indie book, a self-published book that I'm definitely going to be reading very, very soon is Fate and Furies by Helen Shora, because this is the current book, or the next book that I need to read, should I say, for my Patreon Romantasy book club. So this series is following a woman called Thea who wants nothing more than to be one of the Legends of Thasmar. These are the elite warriors of the world that fight back against these dark monsters that keep breaking through into their realm. However, there was a prophecy, I think when Thea was very, very young, that there will be a woman who wields a blade that will bring about the end. So the realms have stopped female warriors from being trained. All of the women that were already warriors have been stripped of their rank. And so this is not a future that is possible for Thea. However, she does go to the royalty of the world to petition them to allow her to train. And she does find herself a little bit of a loophole, but that puts her directly in contact with the surliest of the Legends of Thasmar, which is Wilder Hawthorne. This one in particular is book 3 in the series, but I also plan on reading book 4 really soon as well, either of which would fit for this prompt. The next prompt is unusual transportation, and this one was really difficult for me to get my brain around. So I actually just took a recommendation off the Reddit, which if you guys are struggling to find any books for any of these prompts, there is a thread for every single prompt where users are recommending all of the different books that they think would fit the prompt, and also letting us know whether it would fit for hard mode, which is so helpful, especially when you get a tricky prompt like this. The clarification for this prompt says the story includes a surprising method of moving from place to place. By unusual, we mean that it is out of the ordinary in real life and uncommon to the book's broader genre. This can include a highly unique take on a genre staple. The hard mode for this is that the transportation is not combustion powered or steam powered. If the power source is not stated, use your best judgment. I think I have this one down as achieving hard mode. I don't know what the method of transportation is though, and I don't know why it fulfills hard mode, because I took this straight from the Reddit recommendations. I know because this is a sequel. In book 1 in this series, there is a method of transportation that would fulfill this prompt, which is why it was brought up in the thread, but people said there's a different method of transportation that is only really introduced in book 2 that would also fit. But anyway, the book is The Strength of the Few by James Islington. The transportation that I'm aware of that is present in book 1 is a transvect, which is almost like a big ship that they use to travel in, kind of like a hover ship or a big metal blimp kind of thing. It kind of like flies or hovers across the world. Honestly, I don't know the mechanics of it, but apparently there is transvex within the second book, but also there's something else that would count for this prompt. But The Strength of the Few was actually my favorite book of 2024, and I currently don't have any rereads in for any of the prompts on this board, so I could actually use my reread of The Will of the Many, which I definitely intend to reread that before I jump into The Strength of the Few to count to fulfill this prompt as well. But this series is following a young man who is just trying to escape the system of this world, because it's built on this hierarchical like pyramid scheme where everybody cedes will to the people in the pyramid above them. So the will that you seed is essentially like your strength, your will to live, like your life force you are giving to people above you in this pyramid. And our main character wants nothing to do with this. So he's trying to earn enough money to earn himself a life where he can escape this system and be free. And somebody who is, I think on the 5th tier, I think he's a Quintus in this system, approaches him and offers to adopt him, but in a way that benefits him. And he offers to adopt him to put him into this academy where the elite of the world train, so that he can achieve 2 things. The first thing is to spy on the guy who runs this academy, because the guy who adopts Fizz thinks that he's up to no good and trying to maneuver things politically in his own favor. And the second thing is to investigate the death of his brother who attended the academy a few years ago, and he believes that his death has been covered up. So Viz agrees because this will allow him the prestige that he needs to also live a life outside of this system as he wishes, but then he also has a rebellion group on his back who want to use his placement in this academy to achieve their own ends as well. The next prompt is the afterlife, and that is to read a story that deals with the realm of the dead, so communication with the dead, spirits crossing over. And the hard mode is that the afterlife does not depict a good place versus bad place dichotomy, like a heaven hell kind of balance. So for this one, I've selected one of my Patreon picks that is currently on my TBR, and that is Bonesmith by Nikki Pau-Preto. This one I don't know too much about. I have heard really good things about it though, and I know that the main characters I think are like ghost fighting warriors. They are indeedy, but the first line of the synopsis says, "In the Dominions the dead linger, violent and unpredictable unless a bonesmith severs the ghost from its earthly remains." So I definitely feel like this one counts, and it's already on my TBR, so it's one that I'm definitely going to get to at some point in the next like month or so. This one, I'm not sure whether it achieves hard mode. I feel like that is unclear from the synopsis. That is something that I'm going to have to decide when I'm reading it, and if it doesn't, maybe I'll pick up something else throughout the year that does achieve that, because I feel like that's one that's not too hard to tick off. The next prompt is Game Changer. I have so many books that could fit for this one because it is to read a book that features a game or a competition, and the hard mode is that the protagonist bends or breaks the rules in some way. So for this one, I've decided to continue a series that I'm currently in the middle of, which is of course Dungeon Crawler Carl. I feel like a lot of people are going to be using Dungeon Crawler Carl for this prompt, and the book in the series that I'm currently up to is The Butcher's Masquerade, which is book 5. So this one is a lit RPG story, so it is inherently about a game, but it's following a human man called Carl who walks out into a snowstorm in the middle of the night to try and retrieve his cat who has escaped, when all of the buildings of the earth collapse into the ground, and he hears this ethereal voice that tells him that this planet has now become a dungeon, and he can either try and survive on the surface of the planet, or he can enter the stairways that have opened across the world and venture underground to take part in this intergalactic game show. So he does agree to do so. It's in the middle of a winter storm. He's literally in his underwear. He has no chance of surviving unless he participates in this game. But the further he gets into the game, the more he starts to rail against the system and fight back against the unfairness of this kind of alien presence, these alien corporations deciding that the inhabitants of planet Earth are just going to become fodder for their entertainment. And the prompt is to read a book that takes place somewhere that you like to visit, either fictional or non-fictional. So it could be that you want to go to Westeros if you're reading Game of Thrones, or it could be a fantastical story set in Spain and you want to visit Spain. So for this one, I have gone for a book that is inspired by mythology of a country that I'm going to in October, if that makes any sense. But I'm going to be reading Sons of Darkness by Gaurav Mohanty. Every time I travel, I try and theme my reading around the country that I'm going to be visiting. So for example, I read The Rainfall Market because I was in South Korea, so that one would have also fit for this prompt, and maybe I'll swap it over if I do pick up something else translated. I know I have two more translated books actually, I think, on this TBR for different prompts as well, so there's definitely room to shuffle around. But this one is, I think, a grimdark fantasy that is heavily inspired by Indian mythology, and I am going to India later this year. I'm going there in October on a Trova trip actually. The link is down below if you guys would like to join me for that. It's a safari itinerary, which is very exciting. But this one was actually a pure cover buy for me. I was obsessed with the cover, so I picked up the Broken Binding edition. And so aside from its influences, I don't really know what this is about. I'm not going to dive too much into the synopsis of it, because if you're familiar with this channel, you'll know I really struggle to convey fantastical synopses when I'm not familiar with the world, because it goes kind of like right over my head without context. But it's one that I'm really, really excited to get into. This is a little bit heavy for a vacation read for me though, so I'm aiming to read this, I think, just before I go to India, as opposed to this being the book that I actually read on the trip. The next prompt is the one that I dread every single year, and that is 5 short stories. I don't like short stories, guys. I don't read them. Sometimes I read a little novella, or like I read The Fall by Ryan Carhill, which goes with the Bound and the Broken series, and I actually really enjoyed that. But last year I just couldn't cobble together 5. I hadn't read 5 short stories throughout the course of the year. I do, however, have a couple of short story or like novella bind-ups by authors that I enjoy. So I'm going to be putting one of those in. If I organically read 5 short stories throughout the year, that's great. If not, I should probably at some point read the two things that I own. And I don't know whether you can count novellas for this prompt officially, but the chances of me reading like short stories and novellas both are really slim. So I just feel like we gotta just take what we can get with this one. But I'm pretty sure that the one that I've selected is officially like a short story collection, not novellas. And that is The Inheritance by Robin Hobb and Megan Lindholm, who is Robin Hobb's pen name. So this is an anthology of tales from the Six Duchies and beyond. I think there's 2 or 3 short stories in here that do correlate with the realm of the Eldlings, and the rest are just, I'm assuming, all fantastical short stories that Robin Hobb has written. I do want to obviously read the ones that are associated with the realm of the Eldlings, so I've read literally everything else in that world, and I do really like Robin Hobb as well. So if I'm going to read short stories, at least let it be by an author that I really enjoy. And actually, one of the novellas that I read in the realm of the Eldlings, which was The Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince, I loved. So I feel like I could enjoy these. The next prompt is to read a book with an older protagonist, aka somebody over the age of 50. And hard mode is that they can't have exceptional longevity, they can't be immortal or something like a vampire or an elf. And I have the perfect book for this prompt, which does achieve hard mode, and that is The Undermining of Twyla and Frank by Megan Bannon. So I did know that this had a little bit of an older female main character. I think Frank might be about the same age, because I thought that this was an age gap romance, and I'm pretty sure somebody told me that it wasn't. But I know for sure that Twyla is a little bit older, and I googled it. Google told me that Twyla is 53. So perfect. This is a series of essentially rom-coms on a fantastical backdrop that are all inspired by iconic nostalgic movies. So this one in particular is a When Harry Met Sally retelling, following Twyla and Frank, who have teamed up to join the Tanrian Marshals, which are people that patrol this extra realm within this world that is full of like these zombie-like creatures, and they keep them in check so that they don't break through and attack the inhabitants of this world's civilization. And during the course of their job, Twyla and Frank discover this large footprint that looks like it belongs to a dragon. So then a dracologist gets involved who starts to pay Twyla a lot of attention, which starts to ruffle Frank's feathers a little bit. Moving on to the third row, the first prompt is Duology Part 1, and that is to read a first book in a duology. The hard mode for this is to start a duology by an author that you haven't read from before. So I do have a couple of options for this. My difficulty was finding a series on my shelves that I knew for sure at a glance was a duology and not like a trilogy or a longer series. So I was looking through the recommendations, and a duology that was mentioned by an author that I haven't read from before is the Scarlet Alchemist series. I don't know if that's the name of the series, but the first book is The Scarlet Alchemist by Kylie Lee Baker. This one is a young adult fairy loot book, so past this being a young adult fantasy that deals with alchemy, I don't know too much about this one. This is the second book on my shelves that I have from Kylie Lee Baker though, so it's definitely an author that I want to explore to find out whether I enjoy her writing and want to continue to pursue her work. So I think that this is a great prompt to actually nudge me to prioritizing reading something from Kylie Lee Baker as well. The next prompt is another one that features on every bingo board, and that is the Our Fantasy Book Club or read along prompt. This is to read any of the books that have ever been selected for any of the Our Fantasy book clubs or read-alongs that they host. So there is a list of all of the book clubs. There is also a big spreadsheet which features every book that has been selected for every book club. And the hard mode for this is to participate in the book club as it's happening. So read one of their books of the month alongside the book club. Like join the book club for at least a month essentially. So to fill this prompt in terms of this video, I scrolled up through the spreadsheet until I found a book that I owned that I haven't read yet, and honestly there are many. So I'm not saying that this is necessarily going to be the one that fulfills the prompt, but it is a book on my shelves I need to read. So this is as good as any, really. And that is Ink Blood Sister Scribe by Emma Tors. I don't remember too much about this one. This was the Goldsboro edition as well. It doesn't come with a synopsis, but I'm pretty sure it follows sisters who are tasked with guarding these like rare and most powerful magical tomes. And because of this calling that has been within their family for generations, they have to live their life separated. They all live in different places. And I'm assuming that they have to come together when something goes awry with the books that they have been charged with guarding. I've heard some pretty good things about this, although I haven't heard anything about it super recently. And I think that this is set in the real world, actually, which I wasn't expecting. I thought that this was going to be high fantasy. I feel like it gives that vibe. So I'm really interested to see how that comes into play as well. The next prompt is a pretty easy one for me, but I do want to achieve the hard mode, which is just slightly more difficult. And that is to read a book that is published in 2026, with the hard mode being that it is the author's first published novel. So I'm sure there are a bunch of books that I could read for this, or ones that I am going to read. I have like a number of arcs on my TBR right now, so I'm sure one of them is going to be a debut. But the one that I've selected to fulfill this prompt is Weaving Shore by Heba Al-Wasiti. This one was a very recent Fairy Loot book, I think from the adult sub, that I've been hearing amazing things about. This one does actually concern ghosts as well. I'm pretty sure the main character can see the dead, so it would also fit for that afterlife prompt. And the most exciting thing about this for me is that it concerns a crumbling, like haunted, decrepit old estate, which we know is going to bring that atmosphere. Like I said, I've heard amazing things about this, so I'm really excited that I had the opportunity to put this one on my TBR, as it's one that I would definitely like to get to sooner rather than later. The next prompt is one that felt really difficult to me, even though I do know that it is incredibly easy. Like, based on the books that I read, typically, I know 100% that I am going to encounter a book that fulfills this prompt organically throughout the next year. Like, it would be wild if I didn't, but I could also only think of books that I've read in the past that could fulfill this prompt, as opposed to books on my TBR that could fulfill this prompt. So I did take a recommendation from the Reddit. I'm pretty sure that there are a bunch of things on my TBR, a bunch of books I'm going to read that would 100% work for this one. The prompt is Explorers and Rangers, and the prompt is to read a story featuring an explorer, so a character who travels to and investigates an unfamiliar region, or a ranger, so a wilderness or forest oriented warrior, frequently specializing in things like stealth, bows, tracking, and other hunting related skills. I know I have 800 books on my TBR that feature a ranger character. I could not name a single one. So hard mode for this is that the explorer or ranger has an animal companion, which makes it a little bit more difficult. I'm pretty sure that the book that I've selected for this, based on the recommendations in the Reddit, does not have an animal companion. I did feel like there weren't many recommendations for this prompt, and I think it's because it's one that's like pretty easy. I feel like a lot of people don't need recommendations. I don't know why I'm so stuck on it. I just kept thinking about Camlin from the Faithful and the Fallen series, and it created this mental block where I couldn't kind of think past that to think of anything on my TBR. But the book that I've decided to go is a little bit outside of the way that I would have fulfilled this prompt, or the types of books that I would have selected for this prompt if I hadn't have gone off a recommendation, and that is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This one is a sci-fi that has been on my TBR for such a long time. Not my physical TBR, I don't actually own a copy, but I have heard that the audiobook for this is amazing, so that is definitely the route that I would like to go. But the reason why this has been on my radar is because everybody loves it. Like, it has such glowing reviews, and obviously it's come to the forefront once again right now because the movie is currently in cinemas with Ryan Gosling, which I also really want to watch. And all I know about this one is that it follows a man who has a mission to save humanity, I think. This is the last desperate mission to save his race. However, he wakes up many, many miles from home after being asleep for many, many years, and he doesn't know who he is or what he's supposed to be doing. This is one that I would definitely also like to get to sooner rather than later, because I do want to watch the movie as soon as I can. But if I don't manage to fulfill this prompt with this book specifically, I think that I can definitely go down the fantasy route with this one and also achieve hard mode in that way as well. The next prompt corresponds to one that we had a little bit earlier, and that is Duology Part 2. So this is, of course, to read a second book in a duology, and this is the the only place within the bingo card that you are allowed to break the author rule, aside from that short story caveat, because for this one you are allowed to finish the duology that you started for Duology Part 1. However, the hard mode for this one is to finish a different duology. Now, this one was a little bit easier for me because do I ever finish duologies even though it would be so easy? No, I do not. But one of my most anticipated releases of the year is a sequel to my favorite book of last year, and that is The Knave and the Moon by Rachel Gillig. So there are plenty other duologies I have that I probably won't, but I have the opportunity to finish this year. But this is one that I definitely want to get to wrap up the story of The Knight and the Moth. So The Knight and the Moth is following a diviner called Sybil who has almost reached the end of her service, because diviners in this world are foundlings that are taken by the abbess, trained to be diviners, and then after 10 years they're released, and they're all selected at the same time. So our main character Sybil and her sisters are dreaming of the future that they're going to have together when they're free. However, as this time approaches, the diviners start to go missing one by one. So Sybil has to step outside of her comfort zone and step out into this world that she's never really experienced to go and find a heretical knight that she met when the king arrived at the cathedral to receive the divination that would foretell how well his reign was going to go, and petition him to help her to find the only people that she's ever really known and loved in her entire life. Such a beautiful story with a lot of humor, but also like a bittersweet undertone throughout there as well. And I'm so excited to see how this duology concludes. The next prompt is one word title. This one is pretty self-explanatory. It is a book with a title that is one word. The hard mode is that the title is not a proper noun, so no names of people or places. So the book that I've selected for this is actually my current read, and at the time that I selected it for this prompt, I assumed that it would fulfill hard mode, but now that I've started it, I think that within the context of the world, it might actually be a proper noun. So I'm going to have to, when I continue reading it, keep that in mind so I can figure out whether it does fulfill hard mode or not. It definitely fulfills standard mode anyway, and that is Cold Wire by Chloe Gong. I'm not very far into this. I'm on page 80, but so far this is following two characters, and they live in a country that is at war, and they are actually children, they're orphans of the country that they live in is at war with. And because of that, they are kind of wards of the state. They are forced to join a military academy and perform military service, where they rack up a bunch of debt that they'll never be able to pay off, and are used to fight the country that they're actually from by the country that they're supposed to be citizens of. So they're very much taken advantage of and exploited. We're following two different characters, one who is the adopted daughter of a senator in this world, and one who is currently a cadet at the military academy, who is actually, you know, like performing for her country. She generally like believes in what she's doing, and she's an upstanding cadet. However, she is intercepted by a terrorist who destroys her reputation to force her to aid him in a mission. It took me a little while to get into, but I put the audiobook on to read along at the same time, and that actually helped quite a lot. This also has a lot of discussion on things like artificial intelligence. They have a virtual reality in here because the earth is not like a super great place, so they've created this virtual reality where the majority of the people live, and then we have like this war dynamic as well. So futuristic, dystopian, sci-fi, and a lot going on within the plot as well. The next prompt is non-human protagonist. This is a story featuring a main character who is not human, and hard mode is that there are no human POVs in the story. So this is another recommendation that I got from Reddit, and there was some debate within the thread about whether this actually fits for hard mode or not. So if you guys have read this, I'd be interested to hear your perspective. And that is Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie. So this one is following an artificial intelligence that used to be a colossal starship and also control thousands of soldiers. However, something has destroyed that life and forced her into the body of a singular human, which she is going to use as a vehicle of revenge. So the argument in in the thread was, do the human characters count in this book if they're all actually being controlled by an artificial intelligence? Yes or no? Let me know your thoughts. I think that this would still count for standard mode anyway. I've been wanting to read from Ann Leckie for such a long time. I've done an interview with Pierce Brown and he recommended Ann Leckie, and this has been on my TBR like way before that though. Heard really good things about Ann Leckie, and honestly it's about time that I dove right in. I actually really love the amount of sci-fi that is on this TBR because I always say I adore sci-fi. I feel like I get really into it. However, I just don't read enough of it. I never reach for it and it's really frustrating. The next prompt is to read a middle grade, and hard mode is to read a book by an author who is completely new to you. And that was the bit that threw me a little because I do read a little bit of middle grade. I do have a couple of series I'm in the middle of that I would like to continue, but to fulfill the hard mode, I would have to go with something else on my shelves that's by an author that I haven't read from yet. So I'm not 100% happy with this choice. I don't read as much middle grade now as I previously have, and I'm more interested in keeping up with the series I've already started than exploring new things. But I do own this and I have heard amazing things about it, which is why it's on my TBR. That is A Pinch of Magic by Michelle Harrison. I think that this one has a folklore vibe, if I remember correctly. The synopsis says 3 sisters trapped by an ancient curse, 3 magical objects with the power to change their fate. Will they be enough to break the curse, or will they lead the sisters even deeper into danger? Like I said, I've heard really good things about it. My desire to read middle grade right now is not as high as it has been in the past, but if I own a book, I should want to read it, and I do want to read this one. I feel like I just need a little bit of encouragement, so at least this is doing that for me. The next prompt is First Contact, a very classic sci-fi trope, and that is a story prominently featuring interspecies or interracial meetings for the first time. Hard mode is non-violent first contact. I'm pretty sure that I don't have this one down for hard mode. I actually watched the TV adaptation, or the first season of the TV adaptation of this book, and I've been wanting to dive into this ever since, even though I've heard that the writing is a little bit dry, and that is The Three Body Problem by Cixin Liu. This one I think is translated from Chinese, so it would also count for the translation prompt, also would count for the vacation prompt. I've been to China before and I actually would like to go back again because it's such a big country and there's so many different areas to explore. And this one is set in 2 different timelines. I think it's set in the past, which is kind of the catalyst for the events that happen in the future, and by the past I think we're talking about the 60s, it says on the back of here. And in present day, science is going a little bit weird. Like, scientists are discovering some quite unusual findings in their research and are trying to figure out what that means, and as time goes on that is kind of like escalating more and more, and it is actually like an alien presence that is responsible for it. I really liked season 1 of the TV show. I'm really excited for season 2, and I'm also really excited to read the source material. And the last prompt on this row is murder mystery, and that is of course to read a book where the main plot of the story focuses on solving a murder, and the hard mode is that the main character is not a detective or a private investigator. So I actually had a different book in for this prompt to start off with, but then I very recently received an arc of one of my most anticipated releases of the year, which was Verity Guild by Mike Holland, and I was anticipating this because I've read from and enjoyed Mike Holland before. This is Mike Holland's first romantasy. That's a genre that I really enjoy, so I didn't really look too much into the synopsis, but when I received this I realized that a core part of the plot is that a senator is brutally killed and a temple blade is found at the scene. I'm pretty sure our main character, who is a high priestess, is kind of blamed for it, or she's at least being framed for it. So she then has to team up with a praetorian to uncover the real murderer. Now, I don't know how much of the plot focuses on this murder, but there is a section of the synopsis that says that the main characters are locked on a mountain with a murderer, scheming senators, and a prophecy of death, and that's kind of what forces the praetorian to work with the high priestess. So I'm guessing that the murder mystery element in here is actually going to be quite prominent, which is great because I want to pick this up pretty soon anyway. And then for our final row, the first prompt is cat squasher, which outside of the context of the explanation of this prompt did puzzle me for a moment, but it is to read a book over 500 pages, so a book that's thick enough to squash a cat. And the hard mode for this is to read a book over 900 pages, so I'm real glad that Miss Sarah J. Maas is coming through for us in the next 12 months and delivering us ACOTAR 7, which is reported to be over 900 pages. I think ACOTAR 6, which is out in, is it October, November? That one's like around the 300 page mark, and then 7 is going to be enormous. So I do have a couple of like 1,000 page books on my TBR, but I know for sure that ACOTAR 7 is one that I'm going to be picking up pretty much on release. So this is the perfect excuse to achieve hard mode on a prompt that I otherwise know that I would be procrastinating on quite a lot. Do I need to tell you about ACOTAR at this point? You all know what that is, right? How did you get here without knowing what ACOTAR is? A Court of Thorns and Roses is a romantic series following a young girl who lives in poverty with her sisters and her father. She is their main breadwinner. She's out in the woods hunting one day when she finds this wolf who she is pretty sure is a fairy shapeshifter, but she is just about desperate enough to kill that wolf, drag it back to feed her family, and a big scary Fey Lord crosses into the human lands to claim the main character's life as payment for the life of the Fey that she has taken. We're at a very different place in the series right now, but that's how we start off in A Court of Thorns and Roses. The next prompt is feast your eyes on this. I'm surprised at how little options I feel I have for this. I feel like there's something I may stumble across organically throughout the year to fulfill this one, but the prompt is food or meal is significant to the story's plot, and hard mode is to attempt to make a dish from the book. So for this one, I have chosen Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. It was the easiest, most obvious choice. I feel like people who read things like cozy fantasy are going to have so many options for this. Typically cozy isn't for me, but this I feel is one of the books that started the current cozy fantasy trend, and so it's one that I've had for quite some time now. I can't remember if there's a recipe in here. There's a recipe for something called thimblets at the back, and I am a baker, so maybe I will give that a try. If not, I'm pretty sure that this is about an orc that opens a coffee shop. It's about an orc barbarian that hangs up her sword for good and decides to open a coffee shop. So if nothing else, I can make coffee, but as we have a recipe at the back of this, then I would actually really like to give that a try. The next prompt is a book that was published in the 70s, and the further we go back in time for these decade spaces, the more challenging it gets to me, because I actually just really don't like classic sci-fi. I feel like the 70s is where we're towing the line for me. My love of fantasy starts at around like things that were published in the 90s. 80s I haven't really dabbled with so much, which you will know if you saw my recap video for last year. And then 70s is where I start to get a little bit nervous. But a book that has very recently been republished by Bloomsbury, who reached out to me and asked if I would like to receive a copy, is The Princess Bride by William Goldman. So thank you so much to Bloomsbury for sending this my way when it does arrive. It is a book that I've actually wanted to read for quite some time, but I couldn't quite find an edition that I really loved. And when it comes to like buying classics, I do feel like I want something that looks a little prettier, a little bit more special. This is of course the book that inspired the classic movie, which I also love, As You Wish. You know, if you've seen it, you get me. And so I'm really excited to dive into this one. It follows this young, beautiful woman who falls in love with a boy who I think he's working in the stables, and he wants to go out and make his fortune so that he is worthy of her love. So he goes to do that, but before he comes back, she is kidnapped and taken to a king who has become enamored by her beauty and wants to marry her. So when the boy comes back and realizes that she's been taken, he has to set off on this quest to rescue the love of his life. I have heard that the book is not as good as the movie, which is sad, but I am actually really excited to explore it for myself, and this is the perfect opportunity to do so. Our penultimate prompt is politics and court intrigue. This is another one that I could fill 1,000 times over, and so I actually really struggled to narrow it down to one book because I know that I'm going to hit this so many times. The book that I've selected selected does not hit the hard mode though, because that one is a little bit more specific and a little bit, I know I definitely have books that would fit into this, but it was a little bit harder for me to pin one down in the moment. But the hard mode is that there is a prominent focus on politics at a city level or lower, so kind of like I feel civil unrest, which once again, a book or a series that I've read that would 100% fit this prompt is the Age of Madness series by Joe Abercrombie. 100% would fit hard mode to a T, but alas, I've already read that series, and the book that I've actually chosen is very different vibes for that. It is Fallen Stars by Amani Eriyu. Anything that features like courts and royalty 100% just automatically fulfills this prompt, and this definitely fits the bill in that regard. I haven't actually decided yet whether I want to reread Heavenly Bodies, then read Fallen Stars, and then reread when book 3 is released next March, or whether I want to wait to March, reread book 1, then read book 2, and then read book 3 and do them all together. But this is the sequel to another one of my favorite books of last year, so definitely one that I want to get to. And I also went to an Amani Eriyu event semi recently that made me even more excited to continue on with this series. So Heavenly Bodies is set in a world that is celestial in nature and heavily inspired by the signs of the zodiac. So each of the realms is assigned to like a different star and a different star sign, and our main character is from a realm that is very closely associated with night, and there is this prophecy that she's going to fall in love with a star and then kill them. So this star, knowing the prophecy, comes down to her realm and kills her parents and takes control of her kingdom. So she is then forced to flee for her life, and she ends up on the doorstep of this enemy kingdom called Helios, which is like closely tied to the sun. And the king there very much wants to keep the threat of this star contained, so he offers to train this princess against her will. She doesn't want to ally with him because their kingdoms are enemies, but he offers to train her so that she can go and kill this star to stop this unrest spreading. She doesn't have a choice, she agrees, and she is forced to train with the son of this kingdom, and it is a romantic series, so you can see where it's going. Obviously we have a lot of politics in here. There is the politics between the realms, the fact that our main characters are like a prince and a princess. It's classic stuff. And then our final prompt is author of color. So this one, pretty self-explanatory. It is a book written by a person of color, and the hard mode is that the author does not live in the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. So I have quite a few, like a handful, I would say a decent amount of translated fiction on my shelf. So I selected something from that collection. There's a couple I could go with, but the one that I think I've decided on is Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuki Sugimura. This is one that actually would also fit for the judge a book by its title prompt, because I solely picked this up because it intrigued me. I do enjoy translated fiction. I really love the title of this one actually, more than I enjoy the cover. Since I picked this one up, I have heard that it is a little bit more of a middle grade story than I anticipated. I feel like similarly to the Rainfall Market, but this one has quite a ethereal sounding synopsis. It is set, oh, this would also work for the vacation one, because I'm pretty sure that the characters are from Tokyo. A number of people wake up and they see the mirrors in their bedroom are glimmering, and they end up crossing through that portal into this castle full of like shimmering spires and twinkling chandeliers. It's like a fairy tale castle, and the only catch is that they have to leave before 5 p.m. I do have some more options of translated fantasy on my shelves if I want to swap this one out. I could fulfill this on standard mode like really easily, but I would like to challenge myself to do the hard mode on this one and pick up one of my translated books, you know, because I already have them, so I might as well. So that is everything that I plan to read for the Our Fantasy Bingo Challenge this year. As I said at the beginning, there are quite a few prompts that are a little bit more broad, so I might organically pick some things up that fulfill the prompts. If there's anything I have in for standard mode and I organically read something that would actually be better suited for hard mode, then I'm definitely going to be looking at swapping those out. I would really be interested though in hearing your guys' recommendations for a couple of not even the more difficult prompts, I would say, for this year's board, more the prompts that are kind of so easily filled that I'm struggling to pin down books. So I'd be really interested in hearing if you guys have any recommendations for the Explorers and Rangers prompt, specifically any books that I may own that contain rangers with animal companions. Also for the politics and court intrigue intrigue, if you have recommendations for books that fulfill the hard mode, so they have politics at a city level or lower. I do feel like there's a lot of like criminal underworld books, like Thieves Guild kind of stories that would fit for that now that I'm thinking about it. So I feel like I could actually, what about, oh, would the third book in the Broken Blade series fit for that? It would mean that I would have to swap out the murder mystery prompt because I can't have two Mike Holland books on there, but that's a thought. And then also if you have any suggestions for the unusual transportation prompt, because that one I feel is one that you would not necessarily know going into a book. It's only one that you could fulfill either accidentally or if you knew from a recommendation that it was already there. So let me know if you have any books that fulfill any of those prompts down in the comments. But aside from that, good luck if you're also participated in the challenge this year. If you liked this video, please don't forget to like if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.